think one of the most important lessons is to make sure that engagement exists. Another learning is do a waste audit early. Like, we went into this thinking that we were doing a good job in many different areas, and we found out through the journey that there were a lot of missing pieces. And I think there's got to be oversight, there's got to be engagement, and there's got to be patience.
Hello, welcome to Sustainability Voices, the podcast dedicated to exploring the impactful stories behind the voices driving sustainable change. I'm Patrick Obeid, founder of a climate tech startup and your host for this series. In today's episode, we will explore the importance of zero waste with Amy Vernon from La-Z-Boy. Stay tuned as we uncover various facets of sustainability, voice by voice.
Thank you, Patrick. It is so exciting to be on this podcast today, and I'm really excited to be able to share our waste and recycling story at La-Z-Boy.
Thanks again, Amy, for taking the time to do this. I'm really excited to hear everything you're going to talk about today. To kick things off, Amy, could you help us define what zero waste means in the context of a manufacturing company like La-Z-Boy?
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously by definition, zero waste is, achieving at least 90% resource recovery rate. That doesn't mean that we're not putting anything into the landfill, but we definitely take the opportunity to reduce that number as much as possible. But I also think it's a lifestyle that a company has to choose, and it's something that La-Z-Boy is doing. We're early in the journey. We feel very confident that we can achieve it, but it's important to us as a company, and it's not just manufacturing for us. It's, we have retail locations, we have several distribution centers, as well as manufacturing. So it's a big mountain to climb, but we're excited to keep moving that direction.
Thanks for sharing that, Amy. I think, you said two things that really resonated. One is the word lifestyle, and the second one is a big mountain to climb. So I would love to reflect on the second first, and I'm sure we're going to revisit the first throughout the conversation. Many people think achieving zero waste is unattainable. From your experience, how realistic is this goal?
So I think that it takes a change in a commitment of a company. I think it is realistic to achieve it, and we're living proof of that. And I talk about that a little bit later, but it has to be something that a company is willing to commit to, and not just a few employees. And it's not a project. It is an absolute culture shift. But if you take the time and if you want to commit to it, I definitely think it's achievable.
Another thing that you mentioned is culture shift as well. And I'm excited to dig in. Maybe just before we talk about, the lifestyle and the cultural shift that you had to go through as a company to get on the zero waste journey, would love to take a step back first and hear about La-Z-Boy's strategy for approaching zero waste. Would you mind outlining that for us?
Absolutely. So with a little bit of a backstory, so this was something several years ago that La-Z-Boy did have 8 zero waste facilities in the United States, and they were committed to ensuring that they continue that. As everyone knows, things changed when the pandemic happened, and resources changed and commitments changed, and we felt the need to adjust our strategy moving forward and just reevaluate, what we were doing at those times, what makes sense for us moving forward to make sure that we can continue those paths. So we have several initiatives that are ongoing currently, and it really varies based on the facilities that we have. Like I mentioned, we have retail locations, we have manufacturing facilities, and we have distribution centers. So the material volume, the material type varies at each of those locations. So we have to have different best practices for each types of those locations. Currently, we have some really good best practices. We have some distribution centers that are zero waste today, and one manufacturing site that is. And they've done it through consistency, right? So they have a plan, they have these best practices, they have processes, they continue to educate their employees. And I will tell you that when we talk to the leaders in those buildings, they are passionate about it. When there's a risk of losing that status, they bring it to our attention. They want to make sure that they continue to maintain that zero or net zero practice. So it is exciting once you achieve it, and when they are adamant about maintaining it, it just tells you that it's obviously something that's important to people. And then of course we also have sites where we have a lot of work to do. We have sites where we're in the early phases of auditing their current programs and identifying opportunities for improvement. And we work closely with the EHS teams at those facilities to understand the complexities of those new processes and really try to rely on their expertise to help find those solutions.
I love hearing that, Amy, and I'm really excited to dig in. Maybe first question that comes to mind is I would love to hear more about some of these initiatives that Lazy Boy is taking to decrease waste.
Of course. So when we looked at how we could continue and grow our net zero facilities, like the number of facilities, we decided that we needed to rely on a third-party waste management company who would be able to assist us in finding more vendors to support the volume of recycled materials that we put out. So we produce furniture. So there's a lot of fabric, there's a lot of leather, there's a lot of wood, and we do our best to make sure that those are being used appropriately, but you can't, you're going to have scrap leather, you're going to have fabric waste. So it was very tough for Lazy Boy to try to find vendors who would take the variety of materials that we have. So with working with this third-party waste management company, they evaluated our current vendors and they were able to find local vendors that were local to the well over 200 locations that we manage and cut down not only on the cost, but the transportation emissions as well. So there were vendors out there that we had no idea existed, and this company's been very helpful. It's been a very beneficial for us to work with a company that has nationwide oversight of those types of programs. And we've also focused on just doing a better job of documenting our best practices. As I mentioned before, resources change, people leave the company and sometimes responsibilities get forgotten. So we felt the need to do better at documenting those best practices. We also are helping provide facility layouts for the recycled materials, making sure there's space. So when there's a bin that's full or when something needs to be baled, where do those bales go until the vendors come to pick it up? And then also building a support team to ensure these practices are adopted. That is essential. Sometimes it's tough to get people to change, but when you rely on a support team, it's more likely that they're going to engage in that. I think it's important to note that, this has been a journey. We're still on a journey, but it's also a long-term commitment. The pandemic did cause some issues for us, and that's why we're restarting that journey. And we know that we can do better. We have a long way to go, but the improvements that we've seen in the past year have been really great.
I love hearing these stories, Amy, especially, just to recap a few, like I loved hearing the one around transportation emission reduction, but at the same time, being able to reduce your cost. And it gives me hope that, if Lazyboy was able to find that sweet spot where you could optimize both, your emissions, your waste, and but at the same time your financial positioning, that many other businesses could do the same. Second thing is the documenting best practices. I think many business leaders ask me about like where can I get external benchmarks to be able to learn from and improve my emissions baseline or my waste baseline. And I always say the best benchmarking you could do is look internally. As you said, you have multiple retail locations, multiple manufacturing sites, and there's a lot you can learn from manufacturing site A to apply to manufacturing site B, and there's a lot you can learn from retail site A and apply it to retail site B. So I love that you're doing all of that, and then I'm excited to learn more from you in the coming years. Perhaps one question that comes to mind is like looking ahead for the next 6 months, what milestone can you talk about, and maybe one that you're particularly excited about that you'd like to share with this audience?
Yeah, of course. So it's interesting that you asked that because we've just kicked this off. So I'll be happy to share. One of our largest manufacturing locations is also probably the one that needs the most attention with regard to waste and recycling management. So we have just kicked off that project or that journey with them. We have the third-party company coming into the facility here in a few weeks to help us evaluate our, do a waste management audit, and help us with those best practices. We have a great EHS team at that location, and they want to do better. They know they can do better. They want to do better, but they just don't know how. So I think the partnership and the collaboration with this company is going to really help develop this program for us. And I think that what's important is that you have that commitment. So it's a lot tougher, a lot more challenging when there's a resistance to change, and everybody's familiar with that. It happens quite often. But in this case, we do have a partnership, and they're looking forward to that. So the goal is to have this facility on that net zero journey by the end of 2024. And we're just really super excited that we have that commitment from that internal team.
Amy, I loved hearing all the milestones that you've successfully achieved and the ones that lie ahead. But as you mentioned earlier, this is a mountain to climb. And I'm sure many businesses that are approaching this for the first time feel the same. I would love to hear about some of the challenges that Lazy Boy has encountered on this journey.
Yeah, I think the number one challenge is probably just the idea of change. And that's very common, right? So when we first decided to start this journey over a year ago, or I should say restart this journey over a year ago, we reached out to the leaders of the different areas, and just the idea of implementing a third-party company, and that there was going to be change how we reported and things that we asked of them, there was just some pushback, right? So, and I don't think that's uncommon, and we were prepared for that. And the whole idea was just give it a chance. Let's just try this for a year. If it's an absolute disaster, we'll change the path. But, so it took some time to get everyone on board. But I will tell you that in this past year, there's been a complete change of attitude, a change in presence, a change in just their overall participation. And it's been really good. So we expected it, and we were prepared for it. And we had some really good ways, that we handled it, mostly being involve the employees, engage them, make sure they're part of every step of this from the very beginning, because they are the experts. They're on the floor. They know what's recycled. They know how to read their partners and peers and other people that they work with. We're not the experts of, at least I'm not an expert in manufacturing. So we knew we needed to rely on them to make sure that this was successful.
Thank you for sharing that, Amy. I would love to double click on that and just talk a bit about maybe some of the lessons that you've learned along the way. I really love that mindset of, hey, let's give it a try, let's pivot. And, I think hopefully more businesses need to have the courage to do that in the coming years. Maybe reflecting back on the journey thus far, do you mind sharing some of the lessons that you've learned along the way?
Of course. So I think one of the most important lessons is to make sure that engagement exists. When you see your peers frustrated, or when you see your peers feeling like they're not involved, you just have to make sure that they're involved up front. Field their questions. Even if you think the questions may not be valid, it's valid to them. And that is the only way that you're going to get these people on board. Another learning is do a waste audit early. Like, we went into this thinking that we were doing a good job in many different areas, and we found out through the journey that there were a lot of missing pieces, a lot of materials that were going to the landfill versus being recycled. We thought we had a lot of programs that were running smoothly, and we had lost vendors through the pandemic. And instead of finding new vendors, because it is challenging sometimes, we just switched to throwing our pallets into the dumpster, So those are the things that, again, I think there's got to be oversight, there's got to be engagement, and there's got to be patience.
Thank you for that, Amy. This has been super insightful for me, and really I appreciate you sharing all these stories that I'm sure all of our listeners can relate to or can learn from. Going back to what you said earlier, you mentioned a few things that I loved. Like, one is lifestyle, one is cultural shift, and another story that really, I'm sure is gonna continue being in my brain for the next few years is the story about having passionate leaders across the company who are, not only encouraged to drive change, but also in a way it's becoming competitive. And it's beautiful that that process is gamified. And I think we need more and more companies to embrace that similar mindset. Many other companies in this country and beyond are just starting out with their zero waste initiatives. What would you recommend as the first step for them to embark on?
So I think the most valuable thing you can do is educate your employees on why you're doing this and what it means to the company and what it means to, your kids and your grandkids and down the road, what it means to the environment, and get them engaged. Like, make sure they understand the value, advocate for what you believe in, advocate, to the company, to the leaders, to make sure that this is why. Sometimes I think people get so caught up in the optics of a program that they forget about the purpose of the program. And I think the purpose of this should be focused on what we're doing for the environment, how we can help, how we can do better for years to come. And it's not just about those numbers, reducing waste. It's not about reducing emissions, the numbers itself. It's truly about what we're doing for the earth. And I think, once you get that support and once people engage, for starting the process itself is you need to conduct that waste audit. You need to understand where you are today and identify the gaps. You need to understand where the majority of your waste is going and what you can do to improve those programs. And it's not, I really don't believe it's difficult. Some pieces are difficult, but for the most part, the resources are there. You just have to take the time. For us, it was more about, because we are nationwide, it was more about finding an expert. And that's what we did. And it's been truly valuable for us. If you're a smaller organization, it's not hard to do some research on local companies that'll take materials. The other thing that is great for us is that we spend a lot of time trying to donate. We donate as much as our material as we can. Again, it's not necessarily about getting revenue from these materials. It's about keeping them out of the landfill. It's about protecting the environment. So anytime we have the opportunity to donate, and I'll give you one great example. We take our leather scraps in Mexico and we donate them to a women's prison in Mexico, and they make jackets. So they make coats for people just out of our leather scraps. It's all the material that they use. We actually purchase sewing machines for the prison so they could make these coats for people that, needed, come wintertime, they needed coats. So that's just one. We didn't have an outlet for leather, so we found an outlet. We made a path for that. So there's just a lot of things. It takes time, it takes the energy, but it's so worth it in the end.
I love the story about finding that path. I think, my hope is in the coming years, these initiatives will become more intuitive or become more possible naturally and organically, because not everyone has that proactive mindset of finding that path, and my hope is that it will become easier and easier for businesses to find these alternative paths to improve their sustainability baseline, at the same time improve their financial performance. So I love hearing that. Perhaps one final question before taking a step back and reflecting on the bigger picture. Would you mind sharing some major considerations or strategies that you found particularly effective?
So again, I think the strategies are, for us, is about finding those resources. I think the implementation of a program you can't just do it as a leader down. This isn't a corporate initiative. It has to be a company initiative. Employees will engage when you give them the opportunity, when you put them at the front and you say, hey, what can you do? What makes sense for you guys? How can you help us? Most of the time they love that. They love that engagement. They appreciate it and they want to do better. But overall, having goals, we have goals of, to get this one facility to net zero by end of 24, at least the path on that journey to net zero by 2024. We have distribution centers that have those best practices in place. And once you have a location that's doing it right, don't reinvent the wheel. Take those best practices and implement those at other similar facilities and celebrate that, right? Celebrate those facilities that have done the good work and that are committed to continuing to do the good work. And others will see those celebrations and want to be part of it. So I just think that so much of it just takes engagement across the company.
Absolutely. I think if there's one message for me to leave this conversation with is it's all about the people. You have to communicate, you have to encourage, you have to gamify, you have to learn, repeat, and scale. And I loved hearing all of these anecdotes, Amy. Maybe looking beyond Lazy Boy and just looking at the global scale, how optimistic are you about the potential to achieve zero waste across industries?
Patrick, I can't help but be optimistic about this space. Obviously it's my responsibility, but I see the good work that we've done and I see what we've achieved, and I appreciate how far we've come in the past year, 2 years. I think the one thing worth noting too is that I've had so many opportunities to meet other leaders who are managing the waste and recycling, the sustainability in their companies, and they're just as passionate about looking for solutions. And there's so much collaboration across organizations in all industries, and everyone has the same focus. But the best part about it is that this isn't about a competition of who can do it better. This is about organizations collaborating to make sure everyone is succeeding. And I think that's the best part, because so many times we'll hear, I work with this company and this is what they're able to do. And they share that across organizations, across industries. And it gives, not only does it give these other companies more business, it gives us opportunities to get better. It's sustainability is so much more about collaboration than probably any other branch in a business. And that to me is what's exciting, is with everyone collaborating across organizations, across the globe, you can't be negative about this. You have to be positive, and it's definitely something to be optimistic about.
I could not agree with you more, Amy, and I share the same level of optimism, and I think you and I are witnessing daily change where we see incentives being changed or best practices being shared. And I agree with you as well. I think this is a sector where collaboration is going to play a critical role in success, and I see it on a day-to-day basis. So love that you're sharing the same level of optimism. Maybe one final question before we can conclude this conversation. Everyone, I think we live in a world where innovation drives, plays a big part in the success of many businesses. I think specifically on the sustainability topic, I'm a big believer that innovation will enable many businesses in reaching their goals. Curious to hear from you, is there any innovative technology you are particularly excited about?
I think there's a lot going on in the innovation space. I think that there's companies out there who are developing better tools for sustainability. I'm a huge proponent of that one source of truth, so you can track a lot of your information in one source, one location. It obviously helps with your verification that's going to be required as these sustainability regulations continue to pop up globally. But I think internally for us, innovation is something that is also very important. We look at different things like replacing, our corrugated component packaging with reusable composite containers that could be used, for years, as opposed to a couple times, and those corrugated, packages get damaged and have to be torn down and recycled. But I also, one success that we've had, or I've had recently within Lazy Boy, is having a sustainability review during the product development meeting. So as new products being developed, they have several different areas they review, and they look at product safety and obviously performance of fabric, and how the product functions, how the product will fit in the field. But we've also recently added a sustainability review to that. So long before the product is manufactured, they're looking at how materials could be sustainable, or how could we swap out different types of materials to make sure they're better for the environment. So that was definitely a goal that I was excited to achieve, and hopefully through that we get more visibility internally, and people start to ask more questions and engage more on that material.
Thanks for sharing that, Amy. I think I'm already a Lazy Boy customer, but after this episode, I think I'm probably going to be one of the most loyal customers you're going to have in the coming decades. So it's really exciting. Yeah, and I'm a huge fan, and excited to continue working with you throughout the years. Yeah, I think maybe as we wrap up, would love to hear any parting thoughts that you may have about the journey to zero waste for our listeners?
Yeah, so I think that for us, zero waste is imperative for our company. And again, this isn't about the optics. This isn't about achieving a number. This is absolutely for La-Z-Boy about doing what's right for the earth and doing what's right for our environment and doing what's right for the generations to come. I think, of course, sustainability isn't just protecting the planet. It's about safeguarding every essence of what we live for and what we do. I think it's important to recognize that as we take these actions and every time we make a choice, it has a rippling effect on the balance of our everyday life, right? So when you choose to recycle versus choose to throw something in the street, that's a decision it can be very harmful. And we just have to do better as human beings to protect the earth. We have to do better. And this for us, this is that one thing that we're focused on in the next year to 18 months is we know we can do better. We will do better. We are already doing better. And I have no doubt that we will get back to that our goal is more than 8, but we'll definitely have that 8 net zero in the coming year to 18 months, and we'll continue to progress. And then once we achieve those, what's next, right? It's not just this. We'll continue to do more sustainability initiatives. Biodiversity is a big topic for us internally. So I think it's just important we embrace sustainability and not look at it as a burden. It's just something we should do, and we can all do it. We can all be better, and it just takes that mindset of that positive outlook.
Thank you, Amy. I can tell you I'm leaving this conversation already feeling a lot more inspired and energized, and I'm sure many of our listeners feel the same. Thanks so much for making the time. Very excited to continue working with you in the coming years.
Absolutely. The sentiment is identical, and I really appreciate the opportunity, Patrick. Thank you.
This is the Sustainability Voices podcast. You can find all episodes of the show at esgflo.com, Spotify, YouTube, Google, and Apple Podcasts. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd like for you to subscribe to stay connected. I look forward to welcoming you on the next episode of Sustainability Voices. My name is Patrick Obeid. You can find me on LinkedIn. Thanks so much for listening.